It was the decade of dreams, the Roaring Twenties, a time when America danced to the rhythm of jazz. Cars rolled off Ford's assembly lines, and Wall Street was the new temple of wealth. People believed prosperity would never end. But beneath the glittering surface, something dark was growing, a ghost that would soon haunt the entire world. But what few realized was that this prosperity was built on air. Loans, speculation, and unchecked greed. Banks lent money they didn't have. Companies reported profits they didn't earn. And investors bought stocks they couldn't afford. It was an economy spinning faster than the laws of gravity could hold. But what few realized was that this prosperity was built on air. Loans, speculation, and unchecked greed. Banks lent money they didn't have. Companies reported profits they didn't earn. And investors bought stocks they couldn't afford. It was an economy spinning faster than the laws of gravity could hold. Then came October 24th, 1929, Black Thursday, the day the illusion shattered. Stock prices began to fall and kept falling. Panic spread like wildfire. Men who were millionaires one morning were broke by nightfall. Newspapers called it the crash, but it was much more than that. It was the collapse of confidence. The moment America woke from its dream and saw the nightmare beneath. Factories slowed down. Banks closed their doors. Savings vanished overnight. By the end of 1929, more than $30 billion of wealth had vanished, a number so large it was almost impossible to imagine. Families who once owned homes were living in shanty towns. Farmers who fed the nation were now standing in bread lines. The American dream had become a ghost town. But this was only the beginning. The crash of 1929 wasn't just an American tragedy. It would spread silently, mercilessly across oceans, continents, and generations. The ghost of 1929 had been born, and it was hungry. By the dawn of the 1930s, the American dream lay in ruins. The crash of Wall Street had spread like a virus infecting every corner of the global economy. Banks collapsed. Businesses failed, and the once lively cities fell silent. The Roaring Twenties had turned into the Weeping Thirties. Unemployment soared to levels the world had never seen. By 1933, nearly 25% of American workers were jobless. Families who once had steady lives were suddenly lining up for food handouts. Children searched garbage cans for scraps. Hope became the rarest commodity of all. But the Great Depression wasn't just about poverty, it was about fear. Fear that tomorrow might be worse than today. Fear that nothing could ever return to normal. That invisible fear spread faster than any plague. Banks tried to stop the bleeding by recalling loans, but that only deepened the wound. When people withdrew their savings, banks ran out of money. When banks collapsed, small businesses died. When businesses closed, more people lost jobs. It was a chain reaction, a domino effect that seemed unstoppable. And beyond America's borders, the shock waves were even more destructive. In Europe, nations still recovering from World War I suddenly plunged back into despair. Germany's fragile economy shattered, paving the way for extremism and anger. Factories closed in Britain, France, and Italy. Global trade fell by more than half in just a few years. For millions, life turned into a silent battle for survival. Homeless families built Hoovervilles, makeshift cities of cardboard and wood, named bitterly after President Hoover. Men drifted across America on freight trains, searching for any work they could find. Entire towns disappeared from maps. And yet, even in the darkest moments, there was resilience. Communities came together to share food and hope. Musicians, writers, and photographers captured the human side of tragedy. Their art became a mirror of pain and a whisper of endurance. By the mid-1930s, one question haunted the world. Would this depression ever end? Or was humanity trapped in an endless cycle of boom and bust, doomed to repeat its mistakes? As governments struggled to respond, new ideas began to rise. Some turned to democracy and reform, others to dictatorship and control. The seeds of another global catastrophe were quietly being planted. The ghost of 1929 was not done yet. It was only evolving. Nearly a century has passed since that fateful autumn of 1929. Skyscrapers have grown taller. Technology has advanced beyond imagination, and economies have become digital and global. Yet, the shadows of the past still linger. The ghost of 1929 still whispers through the corridors of modern finance. Look closely at the 21st century economy, and the patterns begin to emerge. Just like the 1920s, we've lived through a time of unstoppable optimism. Tech giants rose like empires. Cryptocurrencies promised a new kind of wealth. Stock markets soared to record highs. Everyone wanted a piece of the dream again. But behind the glow of screens and the hum of innovation, familiar cracks began to form. Corporate debt skyrocketed. Wages stagnated. The gap between the rich and poor widened, just as it did in the late 1920s. And once again, speculation replaced stability. Then came 2008, the modern echo of 1929. Banks gambled with invisible money, wrapped in digital packaging called mortgage-backed securities. When the illusion broke, trillions vanished. Families lost homes. Jobs disappeared overnight. Sound familiar? It should. It was history repeating itself, only this time with algorithms instead of ticker tape. Governments stepped in with stimulus packages, printing money to keep the system alive. Central banks became the lifeline, buying debt, controlling interest rates, playing savior to a fragile economy. It worked for a while. But like in 1929, recovery came with a cost: overconfidence and excess. And then in 2020, a new shock arrived, not from Wall Street, but from a virus. The COVID-19 pandemic froze the world economy in its tracks. Factories stopped. Borders closed. Millions lost jobs in a single season. Governments again printed money. Trillions flowed into the system. But behind the rescue, inflation waited. By 2022, inflation reached heights not seen in 40 years. Food, fuel, and housing costs rose faster than wages. Families struggled, while billionaires saw their fortunes multiply. Sound familiar? It's the same imbalance that fueled the Great Depression's rage. Just like the late 1920s, the global economy today is built on fragile trust. Digital currencies rise and fall overnight. Stock markets react to a single tweet. Artificial intelligence is changing jobs faster than people can adapt. And beneath it all, massive debt. Governments, corporations, individuals all borrowing from tomorrow to survive today. The ghost of 1929 doesn't appear in smoke or chains. It appears in patterns: greed, speculation, inequality, and denial. The same four horsemen that rode into Wall Street nearly a century ago are saddling up again. History doesn't repeat itself exactly, it rhymes. And right now, the rhythm feels hauntingly familiar. The same confidence, the same imbalance, the same illusion that nothing can go wrong, until it does. The Great Depression was not just an economic tragedy. It was a warning written in blood, hunger, and broken dreams. A warning that every generation forgets until it's too late. And today, as we stand on the edge of another uncertain future, the ghost of 1929 is watching. What can we learn from the past before it becomes our present again? The first lesson is humility. No economy, no matter how powerful, is immune to collapse. When greed replaces gratitude and speculation replaces hard work, the fall is only a matter of time. The second lesson is balance. The 1920s taught us that when the rich grow richer and the poor fall behind, society becomes fragile. Inequality is not just unfair, it's unstable. It tears the foundation of nations from beneath their feet. The third lesson is memory. The Great Depression was not caused by one crash, it was caused by forgetting. Forgetting that growth has limits. Forgetting that markets are built on trust, not just profit. And forgetting that numbers on a screen can't measure human suffering. Every era thinks it's different. That technology will save us. That our systems are smarter, faster, safer. But the truth is, human nature hasn't changed. We still chase the same mirages. Wealth without work, growth without risk, security without sacrifice. And now, as artificial intelligence transforms industries, as digital currencies rewrite money itself, and as nations face record debt and inflation, we must ask ourselves, are we writing a new story or just replaying an old one in high definition? The ghost of 1929 doesn't haunt to scare us. It haunts to remind us that progress without principle is fragile, and that no civilization falls in a single day. It begins slowly. When warnings are ignored, when comfort replaces caution, when we stop asking the hard questions. But there is hope. Because unlike those who lived through 1929, we have their story. We have the data, the wisdom, and the memory of what happens when greed outweighs reason. If we choose to listen, we can break the cycle,